a serial killer who kills on full moons, an ex-FBI agent who knows how to get in killers' heads, and a locked-up ally who might be crazier than them all. All this can only mean one thing. We're comparing Manhunter and Red Dragon on this episode of Retro vs. Remake.
Parker.
And I'm Dan Bulick. Welcome to another episode of
Retro versus Remake.
Alright, this is the series where we compare films and their remakes. Join us as we ask the question, should this film exist? Today's films are Manhunter and Red Dragon. Manhunter, released in 1986, starring William Peterson, Dennis Farina, Kim Greist, Joan Allen, Brian Cox, Stephen Lang, Tom Noonan, and a minor appearance by Chris Elliott. I thought that was interesting. Directed by Michael Mann. You might know him for such movies as Heat, Collateral, The Insider is a really good one. Screenplay by Michael Mann. Music by Michael Rubini and the Reds. Red Dragon, released in 2002, starring Ed Norton, Anthony Hopkins, Ralph Fiennes, Harvey Keitel, Emily Watson, Mary Louise Parker, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Directed by Brett Ratner. You might know him from Rush Hour, X-Men The Last Stand, and sexual harassment. Don't want to get too serious here, but let's just address the elephant in the room. Yes, Brett Ratner has been accused of sexually abusing some women in Hollywood. Just to be fair to the victims, I think we should just mention that really quickly. And no, it's not really going to affect our verdict. We'd like to separate the art from the man, and it's a movie, it's a collaborative process. A lot of people worked on it, so it's not really fair to judge all the hard work they put on just because of what one man did. So
I agree.
That's all I want to say about that. And moving on.
I'll say this, not to trivialize the matter. I will hold him accountable for X-Men Last Stand.
Yeah, that you can judge him on. Absolutely, for this movie. Screenplay by Ted Talley. Music by Danny Elfman. And I do want to say that both movies are based on the 1981 book by Thomas Harris of the name Red Dragon. All right, Reggie, let's jump right in. What is your first experience with either film?
You know, I thought I had experience with the remake, and it just turned out it wasn't true. I was thinking of Hannibal Rising, which is not really anything we should discuss today. But no, I've never seen Manhunter. I wasn't really even aware of Brian Cox's take on the Lecter, Hannibal Lecter. And like I mentioned, I thought I saw this remake, but I saw other Hannibal things because this franchise is far-reaching, and there's a lot of products of different, let's just say, quality in the Hannibal universe.
Interesting. I had seen the remake before. I saw it after Silence of the Lambs and the Hannibal movie. So I was familiar with it, but I hadn't probably seen it since I saw it, and that was like the early 2000s when it kind of was released. And the original I hadn't seen ever. I knew about it. I knew Brian Cox was Hannibal. That's about all I knew. So I was pretty interested in checking this one out, just to see how similar they were, since they're two different titles, Manhunter and Red Dragon. All right. Well, these films are very similar. I love when that happens, because then I don't have to go into vague descriptions of these characters. I can teach you the full names, which is great. So before our comparison, let's do the synopsis. William Graham is an ex-FBI agent. He retired after capturing Hannibal Lecter, which took a toll on him physically and mentally. There is now a new serial killer on the loose, the Tooth Fairy, and only Will can stop him before the next full moon. Will has the unique ability to truly get into the killer's minds, even at the cost of his own sanity. Will promises his wife and son that he will only work in a limited capacity, but the more he uncovers, the bigger his role gets. He eventually has to go to Dr. Lecter for help. This is a double-edged sword, as Lecter does help Will, but he helps the killer too. He gives the killer the address of Will's family. Luckily, Will and the police are able to secure his family before anything happens. While this is happening, journalist Lowndes is pestering Will for a story. Will eventually uses Lowndes to draw out the killer, but it backfires and Lounge is kidnapped and set on fire. Meanwhile, the killer, Francis Dollarhide, actually finds love. He starts developing a relationship with his blind coworker, Reba. Things seem to be going well, but then go sour as Dollarhide believes she is cheating on him. So he kidnaps her. Meanwhile, Will and the police finally realize the way the killer chooses his victims. He works at a place that edits their home movies. Will and the police know Francis Dollarhide is the killer. Dollarhide has the next victim lined up, but he turns his sights on Reba instead. The police show up to stop Dollarhide. The films end differently, but ultimately, Dollarhide is killed, Reba survives, and Will goes back to his family. The end. Yeah, the main difference between these two films really is that ending. I'm sure we'll get to that. But I think this is going to be a very character-based comparison episode because everything is so similar. So what better place to start than with our main character, our William Graham.
Okay, so we've got William Graham, played by William Peterson in the original Manhunter.
Just you and me now, sport.
One hunter.
I'm gonna find you, damn it.
FBI agent Will Graham.
We have Ed Norton in the remake.
Two families killed a month apart in their homes. These attacks were highly organized. I need your advice, Dr. Lecter.
I mean, they are the same character, more or less, but the motivation is the same, but I think it's sort of that portrayal. It's all the stuff between the margins is where I think we're going to find the differences. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you really break it down, I mean, Graham is kind of a very straightforward character. It's like, I'm an ex-FBI agent who encountered the serial killer Hannibal Lecter, and it left scars on him, both literally and mentally as well. So I'm going to say off the jump, just to kind of just dive into this conversation, I think that William Peterson clearly, like the way he portrays Graham, shows more of the mental effects of the Hannibal Lecter encounter. Whereas I feel like Ed Norton, it's there, it's talked about in the film, but I never really felt to the same level that he was as scarred and hurt mentally as Peterson played it.
Yeah, I agree. Not just from his experience with Lecter, obviously that carries a lot of weight, but like just the methods he has to go to get in the killer's mind. Just you could see that it takes a toll on him, and it's not only affecting him, but it kind of affects his family more. You get more of his family time in the Manhunter. So he seems like he's got this burden, but he knows he needs to go through with it in order to do the right thing, to save people. Ed Norton doesn't seem like he's really struggling with anything. Either anything that Lecter really did to him or just like trying to find this killer now. There's not really any toll being taken on him. So much as William, I forgot his name too, so much as William Peterson's portrayal. It definitely felt like, man, this guy's just really like hurting himself to do the right thing here. So definitely two different portrayals.
Yeah, like you said, you see more of the family dynamic in the original. And we'll get to what kind of replaces that in the remake. But because you see this close connection, especially with his wife, and the fact that really you get it in both films, but more so in the original, she's really saying, you shouldn't do this. and he knows that's the case. And he knows that really it's his own sort of mental capacity to handle this type of case. And as you mentioned, the deaths that he's going to have to go to or go through to try to catch his killer. He knows that it's going to be a huge strain on him mentally. And Ed Norton, just to me, it feels like, a guy who wants to do the right thing. And like you mentioned, it's just, I'm not seeing that same conflict there at all. And it definitely, as you go through the film, you see that William Peterson's Graham is in actually a really precarious situation by diving into this criminal's mind. Like he's risking his own mind to solve the crime. Whereas Ed Norton, he's risking his family's well-being, he's risking his own life. But I'm not getting that. I'm going down a dark path. I'm just not getting that from Norton.
Yeah. Another thing that William Peterson does a lot more than Ed Norton's character, he sort of has these one-on-one conversations with them. Right? He's talking to them. He's like, "This is what you did, you son of a bitch. You enjoyed it, you son of a bitch." It's a little campy, but it really does show you that he can really start to understand these serial killers. He's really trying to get into their minds. So it's a little over the top. It's a little bit of that 80s cheese, but I don't know. After a while, it just started drawing me in. It's like, yeah, get into that mindset. Let's figure this out. So he's definitely doing that, and you can just see the like wheels turning a lot when he's like, okay, now he's sort of in that killer's mindset, and there's not really too many, if any, moments where Ed Norton's really doing that.
No, I think Ed Norton, like, even though in some cases even the lines are the same, it's like, oh, how'd you do it? You know, you cut, like Ed Norton's felt like a revelation. It was like, okay, I took the clues, and this is the conclusion I came to. Like Peterson feels like he's living it. You know, he's like, all right, what did you do? What were you thinking when he's in the tree? You know, and he realizes that like that's where the guy staked him out. Just like his, like he said, he talks to the camera. He'll look right at the camera. And it's like, how'd you do it? You enjoyed it, didn't you? Like
you took your gloves off, you son of a bitch.
I had to touch her. We could probably do this for another 20 minutes.
It is a little campy because we're having fun with it, but it's a really interesting character portrayal, and I think it ultimately is good and just serves his character more. Than
I never felt like it got into that category of complete camp where I was like, well, this is ridiculous. I would say, and not to jump too far, and towards the end, it does get a little more intense in a way that's like, all right, guys, you're starting to get in some wild area here. But like overall, like I like it because like it's not just him either. It's the other characters in the room, the people that know his history, and like they're feeding off of his energy. And I think that's the big difference between the two. That the Graham energy in that original film just feels dangerous. You know, it feels. Is this guy going to be able to see this mission through? I never really had that question for Ed Norton. I knew that he'd be able to stay the course, but I think Norton is able to play off the killer better. Let's put it that way. Like he knows the killer's weaknesses and is playing to them. Unfortunately, a lot of the killer's weaknesses are Peterson's weaknesses, the way he portrays them. Like all the times that, which we'll get into, where Lecter's saying, "You're just like me." It's like it is that, as you mentioned, that double-edged sword of the more he's like them, the worse it is. Right. You know, like because what's stopping him from being that killer? You know, it actually reminds me of another film that we did recently, which was the Insomnia movies. Yeah. That duality comes into play here, and like you mentioned, there's camp, there's cheese, but it stays grounded just enough that I think it's a very interesting portrayal.
Yeah, I think you nailed it by saying it's just a more dangerous portrayal in Manhunter. Like, you kind of have a feeling like, are they both going to be able to do it? But like, when you're watching Manhunter, you're like, at what cost? Because Williams already talked about like he had to go into a psych ward just because the way he captured Lecter. We just know what he's dealing with. So even though he might have like that one victory, he might lose like ultimately in the end. And there's never that amount of danger for Ed Norton. You just feel like there's only the really sense of physical danger, not like any mental battle that he might lose.
Yeah. I'll also say this, full disclosure, that I happened to watch the director's cut of the original. Again, not to detract this too much, but I think that some of that gets explored a little bit more in the director's cut, and we'll get to that as we go through the film. I'm glad you brought up the sort of mental health aspect in the psych ward, because I think that that's another distinguishing scene in the original film when Graham is talking to his son about his experience going to the mental health ward, and his son is afraid of him. And like I took a lot of cues from that scene for this character, which was his own kid is nervous about it, you know, what he's capable of. So like now I'm definitely nervous about it. And I love the kind of the rawness of that scene. Like a lot of times in like an 80s film, I don't know if they'd be able to pull that off the way they did in this movie, which was, yeah, you know, son, like this is what happened, and a bad thing happened. He did a bad thing, and it made me think bad thoughts. And it just plays back into that, like, what are these bad thoughts Graham is having? And his aversion to getting back into this is probably because he knows deep down inside him there is something bad there, and he's not really trying to turn over that stone.
Yeah, I like that scene a lot too because he's talking to his kid, so he's trying to be as vague as possible while not going into the those dark details. So like it's sort of you're able to kind of paint this picture yourself of like just how bad it really gets. So I like that. They do that a lot. I feel like in Manhunter, they just give you enough, and then you kind of have to fill in the rest, and it's much worse in your own head than being shown it actually.
I think you're right. Actually, one of and we'll get to it when we talk about Lecter. One of the key differences is like what they show in the remake versus what they show in the original.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. By keeping it vague, my imagination was probably worse than the truth.
Yeah.
At one point, when the other cops is like, "Hey, Will, we don't want you to relapse." What does that mean? Like, I don't know what relapse means in this. Is it just we don't want you back in the psych ward, or is it, hey, we know what you were talking about back then, or how you were behaving? Again, extrapolate. What does that mean? Are they going to have to handle him? It's masterfully done, really. I think you nailed it when you said that when it's vague, you start to fill in the blanks. And I filled in the blanks with some pretty dark stuff myself. I'm like, wow, who is Graham? That question was a real question in the original, whereas in the remake, it didn't really matter who Graham was. What Ed Norton pulled off very well was that it was obvious that he was capable and he had a skill set that everyone else didn't have, I guess. Lecter called it imagination, and in the remake, it's his imagination. In the original, it's really his mind. And yes, his imagination, but what would he do with his imagination? That was a question mark.
I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about Will. We could talk about the other character, but I do want to just say one more thing. After his interactions with Lecter, in the original, he kind of like freaks the fuck out. He's running out of that prison, just like trying to get some air. Like he's clearly not over what happened between him and Lecter. And then in the remake, you don't get a scene like that at all. There's no panic. I think I read somewhere that the only thing you could see that he was even nervous was that like he comes out and he's got some pit stains. So it's just it's just a small little difference that I appreciated a little bit more in the original. That like this guy, he played it cool in front of Lecter as long as he could, but as soon as he was out there, he just kind of broke down and he let everything kind of happen or take over. So just, and again, small differences. You could see that in the original, he's a little more, damaged mentally than Ed Norton's character.
Yeah. I'll say this, that to your point, when he freaks out after the meeting, like when Lords, the journalist, takes a photo of him, he's hunched over, he's like having trouble breathing. Like that's on full display. And that's, knowledge that's available as we learn in the movie. That's knowledge that's available to both Lecter and the killers. So he's much more vulnerable to your point. Yeah. And then with like Norton, like you mentioned, the pit stains, I missed that. I didn't really see that. Like,
I didn't see it either. I read it on IMDb. That's the only way I got that.
Yeah. I mean, the only time that like when I really noticed that his nervousness betrayed him was when they had Lecter on that weird like track. Like he was like tied to the ceiling so he couldn't do stuff, which I thought was weird. Like Lecter kind of jumps at him and like, he flinches in that moment. But other than that, like Norton is just right here the whole film, steady. And Peterson he's all over the place, and I think it's a great asset to that original film. Not to say that the Norton portrayal is bad; it's a very good portrayal, but there's just more to Graham in the original film.
Well said. I really don't have anything to add, so if you're good, I think we can go on to our second lead, I guess, so to speak. All right, so let's go on to the next character. I mean, you can't talk about any of these movies without talking about him, right? So our Hannibal Lecters. In Manhunter, he's portrayed by Brian Cox.
Then by implication, you think you're smarter than me since you caught me.
No. I know that I'm not smarter than you.
Then how did you catch me, Will?
You had disadvantages.
What disadvantages?
You're insane.
Red Dragon, he's of course portrayed by Anthony Hopkins.
If you recall, Will, our last collaboration ended rather messily.
I think that the best place to start is actually, funny enough, at the beginning. In the beginning of Red Dragon, we see the Hannibal Lecter takedown. We see how Graham stopped Lecter. We hear about it in the original film, And again, that vagueness led us to our own sort of conclusions about how that went. Whereas in a remake, like I understand why they do it because you get to see pretty much a lot of backdrop in that opening scene. I tend to not like hand holding in movies, you know that about me, but like I was very impressed by how much information they were able to get across in the opening sequence of the Red Dragon movie, whether it was the newspaper clippings about Hannibal Lecter and like talking about his crimes and like his mindset. We get that early conflict between Ed Norton and Anthony Hopkins in an actual battle. They fight it out. Like I was very happy to see what was described in the original film sort of played out. But again, like everything, that is a double-edged sword as well because we know what Hannibal's capable of and we know what Ed Norton's capable of. And for all the talk of how much it affected him, you would think that it would have affected him more.
You thought it would have been a little bit more than just getting stabbed. Like maybe Hannibal played with him a little bit, as we know Hannibal to do. Yeah. So I'll just set up the scene. First, it starts off at like an orchestra with Hannibal just like listening to some music, and he's focusing on this one guy playing the flute. And he's not quite hitting those notes right, Reggie. And then we go to this dinner party afterwards with, I guess, an organization who puts this orchestra together. And then he's, serving them this mystery meat. And we're talking about the flute guy going missing. So, you know who Hannibal is. You know what they're eating. It's they're playing to the strengths of the character. This is how you want Hannibal. Here he is, right in the opening. He's doing his thing, feeding people. It's what you know, it's what you love. And then you do get to see him get like kind of gruesome. Not as gruesome though, I guess, as you want though, because like you said, we know what he's capable of. You've seen Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal before. He's like really vicious, and it's kind of a letdown that he only really just stabs Will.
Yeah,
and that's supposed to like have mentally scarred him. I mean, it's traumatic for sure, but what Hannibal's capable of. I think you could have maybe just a little taste, a little nip there, Hannibal.
Yeah. I think Ed Norton is a little too easily able to kind of overcome the situation. I think that, and I understand why it's not there, and you probably would be wasting a little bit too much time with it. But like, there should have been more to that scene. To your point, like whether it was like some sort of torture, whether it was some sort of collateral damage, like if Norton had to make a choice about someone's like well-being or his own, something that would really make that scar. But like, kind of like coming to the conclusion that the psychiatrist you've been working with to try to like solve this is actually like the murderer, and like he opens up the book just like what's described in the original film. It's like weird like World War like battle wounds and stuff like that in the book, and he's got like a shortbread recipe in there, so it's like he eats people. But I would have liked that scene. I mean, it sounds kind of dark, but like I would have liked that scene to be a little bit more sort of torturous than what we got, which was just like, all right, sure, he stabbed Ed Norton, but then Ed Norton immediately stabbed him, and then he shot him, and it's like, how is that like the big scarring moment? We probably need to know more about their relationship, or we would have had to see that scene play out a little bit more dangerously and a little bit longer for me to believe that it had this like super lasting effect. And I think that's why in the movie it doesn't come across as it did.
Yeah, and that's probably why we don't see Ed Norton as scarred as Will in the Manhunter, because it seems bad, but not something necessarily that would make you mentally damaged. And right. Correct me if I'm wrong though, I think in the original he might have had a partner, because when he visits Hannibal in the Manhunter, he asks about another detective.
And how is Officer Stewart? The one who was first to see my basement.
Stewart's fine.
Emotional problems, I hear.
And he says, he's fine. He's a little mentally not there or something, but overall he was okay. So I think Will might have had a partner when he got Hannibal.
So something like that, because I actually, weirdly enough, rewatched that scene today. Like I was kind of going through some some interviews and stuff like that, and they played that clip when they first meet in the prison. And you're right, he asked about sergeant or detective, whatever his name was, and like you mentioned, Peterson's like, oh no, he's okay, and he's like, and Hannibal actually makes a note about like that person's mental health, like that person had sort of a mental breakdown as well.
Yeah. So
this Hannibal both Hannibals are dangerous. We know that Anthony Hopkins' portrayal and just how deep into your psyche he can get. Like Brian Cox like really does a number on people, and they're two different portrayals, but like I find them both to be to hold weight on their own merit.
They definitely do. Obviously, Anthony Hopkins gets a lot more to do. This is his third time, and I think it was his final time portraying the character. And he's like, if you've seen the movie poster, he's right there. It's like his head over like a tiny Ed Norton. So they want him front and center in this movie. They know people love Hannibal, so they're going to give you as much Hannibal as they can. So, he's in the beginning of that movie. He's also in the end, a little teaser for Silence of the Lambs. So they sprinkle Hannibal throughout because they know that's what the crowd wants. And, Anthony Hopkins does what he does, but he doesn't really get to be, I guess, so threatening in this one because Hannibal is more of just like a background character. He doesn't really have like an arc or doesn't get to escape or really hurt anybody so much as other than the beginning of the movie where he's serving up the guy who plays the flute. And Brian Cox, it's an interesting portrayal. He does get to show just his intelligence and how he's able to get Will's home address, and he does get to do a cool little phone hack with a gum wrapper. I don't know how sound that science is, but sure, why not? And he's kind of funny when he's on the phone because he like talks to somebody at the university. He's like, "Oh, what was the name of that receptionist?" Oh, her name's Martha. He's like, "All right, great." So he thinks he's gonna use that. He's like, "Hey, Martha." It's like Martha's not here right now. He's like, "Fuck!" So he like improvise, and he's kind of a dick to the whoever's working at night instead of Martha. So it's a different portrayal of Hannibal, but it definitely I could appreciate it in its own right.
Yeah, yeah. Anthony Hopkins, I mean, he is Hannibal. We know that Anthony Hopkins is Hannibal. Great performance as usual. But a lot of the Hannibal mystery is kind of gone. So even though this is a prequel, like we know so much about Hannibal already, especially the way Anthony Hopkins has played it, that he's playing Hannibal, like as he's done in the past, and it works. And he's mentally sparring with Ed Norton, and honestly, a lot of people in the film. He gets way more screen time than Brian Cox. Like you mentioned, even though he's technically not the lead or the villain, but like he's the poster of the film. So, Anthony Hopkins, he does what he does. But like, I appreciate that Brian Cox. One, I've never seen his portrayal, and it's different. It was the first portrayal. I think he was very capable. To your point, he didn't seem as dangerous physically as Anthony Hopkins does, which is weird given Anthony Hopkins' age. But like the way they let Anthony Hopkins sort of act and like kind of use action, he seems to be more physically imposing. Where like this one just seems to be like you mentioned, he can be a dick and he can get under your skin. Like he just knows how to push your buttons. He knows how to manipulate people. And I felt that to me when he got Will's address and like gave that to the killer, that had more of an impact on me in the original film than in the remake for whatever reason. It's the same thing, I guess, but like it just felt more treacherous for some reason than the original. It's just like, wow, this guy is just he's a dirty fuck. Like he'll do anything it takes to get in your head. And like Anthony Hopkins is more of a slow burn. And I think part of that is because that's how he's played the character in the past. And he has time to actually let things build and burn. But
yeah. To your point, I think the Brian Cox, when he does that phone call, it just seems like more menacing because we hadn't seen him do anything, and so we were just assuming that Lecter's going to play along. And then when he does this, it almost kind of comes out of nowhere, so it does take you by surprise, as opposed to the Hopkins portrayal. We already saw him try to kill Will, so it's not going to be a surprise that he's still, trying to get back at him, trying to get even with him. And to your other point, that the Anthony Hopkins seems more dangerous physically, I think a lot of that just has the way the guards kind of treat him. Like in the original, like to give Brian Cox the phone, it's just like, just turn around, face the wall, or I'll mace you. One cop, right? To give Hannibal Lecter the phone, you got like 3 armed guards with a shotgun, just aiming it right at him. The threat level, what the police are doing tells me that this guy is a little more threatening. And just the way they treat Hannibal overall in Red Dragon just makes him seem like the bigger threat. But because we get less of him in Manhunter, when he does something, it just seems like it has more of an an effect because we're getting so little Hannibal in the
Yeah.
Manhunter.
As we were kind of talking about, I was thinking about it a little bit more too. I think it's also because I care about Graham's family more in the original.
Yeah.
Because we just spend more time with him. The wife is a little bit more fleshed out, which we'll get into in the original. So just like, oh geez, he's gonna go after this guy's family. Like you mentioned, like Anthony Hopkins' greatest strength is I know how well he plays his character. What Brian Cox's greatest strength for me was I've never seen his portrayal, and like I was very surprised at just the lengths that he would go to try to like cause damage. Whereas like I expect that from Anthony Hopkins, as you mentioned. So I think those are kind of the key differences when it comes to like the threat level in the film.
I think Brian Cox only has like 3 scenes in Manhunter, and Anthony Hopkins definitely has a lot more. So he gets a little more to play with. So we do get a lot. Obviously we get more Hannibal, and it's Anthony Hopkins. I mean, I'm not going to complain that I'm seeing Anthony Hopkins do Hannibal. So if I had to compare them, it's obviously Anthony Hopkins because he is Hannibal. But then what are you going to do? But still, a very good portrayal by Brian Cox. And I was a little worried because it's like, how does anybody? I mean, now we have the Hannibal show, but like, how back then, like before Anthony Hopkins, you didn't even know how to work this character, and I thought he did pretty good.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, look, Hopkins played the character to an Oscar turn, so you can't really debate who is Hannibal Lecter. I mean, like he is Hannibal Lecter in people's minds. Brian Cox holds his own. Even with the limited screen time, even with the '80s sort of a sheen on the film, I think that like it's a compelling Lecter, and it would actually be interesting to see him get to do as much with that character as Anthony Hopkins got to over the years, because I think you could make an argument that although it's not equal, like obviously like I'm putting the edge of Anthony Hopkins. I mean, they're toe to toe. I think that they're both very strong portrayals, so I want to give Brian Cox his due because he was first and he did it very well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Should we go on to our actual villain in the movie?
Yeah.
All right. So we have Francis Dollarhide, portrayed by Tom Noonan in Manhunter.
Francis is gone. Francis is gone forever.
Rafe Fiennes in Red Dragon.
I am the dragon.
Give me what I need.
Before me, you tremble.
They are very different portrayals. In the remake, in Red Dragon, we see Dollarhide at the 43-minute mark, I think. We don't see Dollarhide in the original until about the hour mark. Yeah. So, I like that more that they did that in Manhunter because, we're just investigating him the whole time. We're learning about his crimes, what he did. And it's just building up until we finally see him. And then when we do see each character for the first time, it's in different circumstances.
Yeah.
I'll start with Red Dragon again. We see Francis in his attic. He's wearing, I guess, they don't look quite like pantyhose, but something like pantyhose or like a burlap sack, something over his face, so you can't quite see his face. You just kind of see the crazy place he lives in with like weird paintings, and then it was his scrapbook that we were seeing in the opening credits. Mm-hmm. And we get to see a serial killer use a glue stick. You can't really say that too often. That was great when he's putting together his little scrapbook. So it's not obviously not normal behavior, but not necessarily terrifying at the same time, as opposed to Dollarhide in the original, in Manhunter. The first time we see him, he's got Lowndes. He's got him taken prisoner. Lowndes is freaking out. The first time we see him, the serial killer, he's going to do what serial killers do. So yes. Right off the bat, he's just a more terrifying portrayal.
Well, here I am.
I'm right there with you. It actually reminds me a little bit of like when you see Buffalo Bill in the Silence of the Lambs, like the scene where he's in front of the mirror and he's playing Goodbye Horses. Like I got that vibe. Like when he had the stocking, whatever, on half his face, and he's just like so menacing. Tom Noonan looked scary as shit. Like I was like, I am very uncomfortable with what I'm seeing right now.
You and the others, you owe me all.
It's like Lounge is in trouble because this guy, this guy is the serial killer. It's like, well, of course he is because look at him. Whereas like Ralph Fiennes, I think you're right. It's sort of it blunts the terror when you get to kind of know him a little bit. And I think that's sort of the point of Red Dragon that you get more of an idea of who Dollahide is, and like that scene plays back into some different things we know about him. Like he's strong. They keep bringing that up. Like this guy's really strong. So he's like lifting weights, and you can kind of hear like this internal dialogue of like his past and like clearly like the grandma or something like that. Like he's got a lot of problems. I think we do see the tattoo in that first sequence, right? Or
yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
So I mean, like they play into the William Blake painting more. Like there's a huge painting. The house is all dilapidated, so you get an idea of like kind of how he's living a little bit more in the remake. But like just it's irrelevant in the original. When you see this guy, it's just like that dude's creepy. I don't like it. And like you said, he does serial killer stuff from the beginning. And very early on in the movie, like, yeah, I would say the Manhunter portrayal definitely freaked me out a lot more upon first seeing the villain.
Yeah. And also, because we're seeing Tom Noonan, he interacts with Lounge, right? Like, Ray Fiennes isn't really talking to like other people, so to speak. So, his manner, the way he's talking, well, he has a man like tied up that he knows he's gonna kill. It's just like it's so like eerily calm. He's like, "Do you see?" He's just like he's just talking. He's not yelling at him. It doesn't sound like he's got any like anger or anything in his voice. He's just kind of talking normal. So it's just like this guy really is fucking crazy if he thinks he can just like act like this is all kind of normal going on. So yeah, it's just a very creepy portrayal.
It is, and like you said, with the normalcy, I just felt more like when Lounge really does think that he might let him go, you know, because he comes out, it's like, oh, what do you think? So you think I'm a homosexual? You think I'm out here? He's like, no, I'm sorry, dude. Like, I didn't mean it. And like, he's very, like you mentioned, he's very calm in this like eerie way, which is just like you don't understand. You were witnessing the great change. You're afterbirth of an ant and stuff like that. Like all these like wild lines, just the way he delivers them. Like it really comes across as like believable to me that this guy has been like hacking people up and like you mentioned, just that sequence do you see? Like he's gonna make you see, and like it is so creepy, man. Like I knocked it out of the park right there from the opening scene. Ralph Fiennes, like when we finally do get to that point, it's the same thing, but it's sort of like we were saying with Hannibal. You showed me something before, so now some of that mystery is gone. And like, I also say that, because I watched them kind of in order the movies came out, like you kind of know what's going to happen to Lounge there. So, I'll give credit back to Red Dragon that I kind of knew what was going to happen there. But like, I think even without knowing it, I don't think it would have had as much of an impact as that original is. Because just the first thing you see is a guy with a stocking on his head. He's got a guy tied up, and he is talking all kinds of crazy. It's nuts.
I don't know if I'm getting ahead here, or I'm just if there's anything else you want to talk about that. But like, just there's two different things going on too with the serial killers. I'm gonna start with Red Dragon again. Ray Fiennes' character, he's like hearing these voices, right? He's like, "No, I don't want to do that," or "Yes, I will do that," or "Sure, Red Dragon, I will follow you," or whatever. He's not quite in control, right? Mm-hmm. He's clearly insane, Makes sense. He's a serial killer. So, but he's kind of at the mercy of this Red Dragon thing, or his mother sometimes. It's not quite clear. It doesn't need to be clear. You don't really get that in Manhunter. This guy knows exactly what he's doing. He's in complete control. He does get a little bit jealous later, but I still feel like he's not really like fighting anything. There's not like this weird conflict like I need to be good or I don't need to do this. Like this guy's pretty much just wants to be a killer. I like that.
Yeah. There's a few humanizing moments in Red Dragon. Like there's moments where like they try to show us as an audience as to how someone like this could exist. Whether it was he's abused as a child, which he's keeping a literal scrapbook with all of his experiences, and it's like, all right, like, okay, I get it, and like, the cleft palate, they really played into like his concerns about his appearance and stuff like that. There's just so much more time with him and the way his mind works that you're right. Like he's, I don't know, maybe you can call it schizophrenic or whatever you want to call it, but like he's got voices in his head, and like you mentioned, he's fighting the voices. So it's almost like there's the good guy version of him somewhere deep down there, and unfortunately, the Red Dragon's taken hold because we'll get into it when we talk about the love interest in the films. There's this humanity that he's fighting to kind of get back a little bit, but he's just he can't. It's just not going to happen. And to your point, like it blunts some of the action because he's not fully culpable for it. Like, I mean, he is obviously, but like we now have kind of like an excuse for why he's doing this, so it makes it if only he didn't have this problem, or if only he was treated better as a child. Tom Noonan, I don't know why the hell he's doing anything. I mean, this stuff's there. It's also there in the dialogue, but like the reality is, like, I don't care what happened to you. That guy is acting very, very strange, and there's not enough time with him in a humanizing element for me to be like to want anything to happen other than for him to be stopped. It's like
is there anything else?
Really, really, the only thing that I can think of is just how much more they flesh out the Red Dragon in the remake. He's got some sort of background, apparently with like potentially like military stuff, because they bring that up. He's a big guy. He's an imposing figure. He's also really vulnerable. So like we get a little bit more of just like his day to day. It's like when we do get to the love interest, we learn more about his day to day at work. Like we don't get that in the original. Like people in the office, know that he's a bit off, but like there's enough normal about him that he functions in society, and we understand how he could function in society. I don't really understand how Tom Noonan is getting away with being who he is.
Yeah, he just not only like acts bizarre, he like dresses bizarre too. It's just like, oh man, you're just not even trying to fit in, are you, dude? So I think we should just go into the love interest, 'cause that'll help flesh out our diehard characters. So our love interest, Reba McClane, I think, not related to John McClane, portrayed by Joan Allen in Manhunter.
Where was it?
Holland.
Oh, thanks for right.
And Emily Watson in Red Dragon.
I know what it's like to have people always thinking that you're different.
Our blind love interest. I'll start again with Red Dragon. His co-workers, meets her at work, and the first interaction is kind of short, just kind of introduces her, or gets introduced to her, and then he just sees a coworker like hitting on her, and she says no, I'll just take a bus home, but ultimately he just gives her a ride home anyway, and that's kind of it. There's nothing really there, just the introduction of those two characters. The original Manhunter, they don't waste any time with, like, they meet for the first time. We do know that there's another guy who takes her home, but not necessarily a love interest. And then he kind of takes her to the vet, where she gets to see this tiger that's passed out, and she gets to like feel it, hear its heartbeat. And then he takes her back to his place, and he's watching a movie of the next victims because she's blind, so it's okay. And then they bang. I mean, a lot of things happen on their first meeting. It moves pretty fast in the original.
Yeah, it gets really fast tracked, which honestly, in a way, I kind of appreciate, to be honest. Like, there's not really a lot of reason. Again, in the original, they don't spend a lot of time fleshing out this guy. Like, he's a serial killer, and go. like I said, I did appreciate sort of the speed. It was kind of unusual how quickly things advanced. Like you said, they met. Like, hey, get a ride with me. She's like, yeah, okay. I want to show you something. So we get the tiger scene much earlier in the original film in terms of their interaction. And I think like I kind of get that. Like Reba mentions in the first film that she's sort of kind of hired to kind of fill out like almost like a diversity hire. It's like, oh, they needed like a handicapped person for a government grant. So I also think that the mirrors in the original film get a lot more play and explanation, in my opinion, than in the remake. And like, there's something about like her being blind and him with the mirrors and the eyelids thing that I thought was an interesting kind of crossplay throughout the film. And it was just interesting that like, all right, she got the tiger. I guess they got her all jazzed up. So when they got back to the house, it was on, buddy.
She was ready to go. She's the one that made all the moves too.
That was the weirdest sex scene that I've seen in a movie in a long time. And I watched the other two sex scenes in this movie, which were not great. But like the normalcy wasn't there. Like he's hooking up with this chick and it's just so strange. His arms aren't where they should be, you know. He's just like, I don't know. Like you mentioned, she's putting on all the moves and he's really awkward. And what I liked about that difference in the films is that her coming into his life was the sort of normalizing, humanizing element, which is like, okay, maybe there's a chance for this guy to turn around. And it gets dashed when he thinks that like she has another love interest herself. But like for a brief moment here, even this guy was starting to kind of like turn the corner, which like we didn't really need that with Ralph Fiennes. Like he was doing enough kind of socially, which we see from the love interest in the remake, where she's saying, you know, all the girls describe your work because she can't see. She's like, they say, you know, you're tall, you got a good body and stuff like that. So like, if he wasn't so weird, he actually could have been like okay in society. He actually has a more negative version of himself than what he's actually coming across as. Whereas in the original, to me, whatever you think about this guy, believe it. But in the remake, it's like he's putting on a lot of his own projections on the world. And, you know, it's a nice subtle difference. But I think that I don't know, like you said, because he has the red dragon sort of telling him what to do. I don't know. The sequence feels a lot different to me. I don't know about you.
Okay. The love story in both of these movies. Definitely not my favorite part. It definitely slows down. Especially noticed it more in the original because we do spend like a lot of time with those two characters just like for a bit. And it's like the investigation of the crime just like comes to a complete halt. Yeah, like I said, it's not my favorite part. I think I like parts of it and I don't like parts of it in the remake. I do like how it's spaced out more in the remake, how they don't just like go through like all the phases of a relationship in one night. And I think Reba or Emily Watson has a little more to play with. We do hear about her backstory more, how she wasn't always blind. Last thing she saw was a cougar. So when he takes her to see the tiger, it like has more meaning for her. So I thought it was like a sweeter moment. And like you said, it really humanizes him. It's like supposed to make us think like maybe he can come back from that. But like I didn't really think that at all. Like I know what this guy did, and to two families, I didn't think there's any chance that somebody like that could come back. So while it was sweeter and more humanizing, I guess, in the remake, for me, I didn't really believe for a second that it was possible for this guy to really come back. So while it's nicer, I think, in the remake, it's just like ultimately kind of pointless because this guy's a killer. He's clearly a killer. So I guess I do like in the original Manhunter how quickly it moves because like we don't have to spend time like developing this relationship and then maybe he was gonna come back because I knew there's no fucking way that guy with the fucking pantyhose on his face is gonna fucking come back. Right. I think I like Emily Watson's portrayal a little bit more than Joan Allen's just because she has more of a backstory. But ultimately, for me, it is like the weakest part of the movie because I just didn't believe that Dollar Hyde was redeemable.
It's almost like a means to end. Like in the original film, everything happened so quickly. Like even as you were talking, I'm thinking of the word like humanizing, and it really is just because he is inhuman. Like his entire being is just wrong. So like I guess anything resembling a human interaction and like something resembling tenderness was like, okay, maybe this guy, maybe, like I said, big time, maybe he could be like somewhat normal, but then he immediately comes crashing down because of course he did. Like he sees basically she's like, oh, you got something in your eye, and he sees, oh, these two are like making out. I gotta step here and do something. So like again, his perception of reality, which is true about both of them, but his perception of reality is so off base that there was never a chance, to your point, that he was going to be anything other than a serial killer. The remake plays with this idea that perhaps he could be, and they really want you to kind of care about his relationship with Emily Watson. But I think, to your point, ultimately, really the only purpose it serves is to flesh out the villain a little bit more. I mean, it's important that she's there, but she really is kind of filler until we get back to the main plot line. I think you kind of nail it. That in both films, it just kind of stops what the point is, and I guess that's okay to flesh out your villain a little bit more. But these aren't even movies where I think you even need to continue to do so. They're bad guys, and he's trying to catch them. Like, since nothing ultimately comes from the love interest, I think you're right that it sort of just puts the brakes in a weird place. And the one upside to your point as well in the original is that at least we get over it really quickly. It's like boom, 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 boom. All right, we banged. I'm gonna kill you. Moving on.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird in the remake too. Maybe you can help me out with the scene because he does freak out after they bang in the remake, and he's like, "You gotta go, I gotta go, I got a work trip," and then he goes to, I guess, get the original painting of the red dragon thing.
Yeah,
and he proceeds to eat it in a bizarre scene, and he doesn't kill the two women who witnessed him sort of doing that. And he says that was to save Reba. But then at the same time, he wants to burn down his house and do like a murder-suicide with her. I was just confused by that.
No, it's confusing. I mean, mentally, sorry, I'm trying to get my height right here. Mentally, it's all messed up. So obviously, like, he's got this obsession with a lot of things. He's got an obsession with Hannibal Lecter, for instance. He's kind of like his hero. You know, he's writing him. You know, it's like Eminem's Stan. He's writing
the original Stan. I guess nice.
You're Hannibal. You're a really cool guy. But like, unfortunately, like from there, I started to kind of started to not like the portrayal in Red Dragon from basically that point that you're talking about, because it's so sloppy. You know, like everything else was so, you know, at least more so, was more calculated and careful. And I didn't feel like I lost that in the original. I think that yes, he was sort of emotional and stuff like that, but it wasn't like he got caught because he was sloppy in the relationship. He just got caught because over time they figured it out. Whereas like in this remake, okay, you're obsessed with William Blake's painting and you're going to go to the Brooklyn Museum to like get the original painting. It doesn't really make sense, you know, like, oh, if I destroy this like cool old painting, then like I'll be free. And I just thought like the idea that he could go into the Brooklyn Museum and like the only thing stopping him from like being able to destroy a priceless painting is one older woman that like invited him in. Like it just felt like no, and like it felt like right there he should have been caught, because how the hell were you going to get out of there? Like the fact that they're even still trying to figure out who he was is like, it's the Brooklyn Museum. Like I know it's the 80s, but like there's a camera. There were guards. There's all kinds of other things that would have stopped him from escaping. So like it just felt like the movie just started to kind of like move along through these paces, because now we're at the end game because we chose to do this like weird painting eating scene. And to your point, it is confusing. Like what was his purpose? Like to save her? But clearly it wasn't working because he thought that he had to kill her to save her. So it just feels like a very weird side quest, you know? Like honestly, the thing that pissed me off the most, which really shouldn't have been a takeaway, is that he could destroy like an old painting like that. I'm a fan of the arts, Dan, and like no bullshit. I was really sitting there like, oh, I can't believe they're gonna let him. Again, I know it's a movie. I know it's fiction and fantasy and stuff like that, but I'm just sitting there like, well, just why aren't we taking better care of our culture? And it feels like it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it could have easily been cut, that scene, and it still would have functioned as well as it did without it, because I really don't know the impact of him going all the way to Brooklyn, eating this painting, because we still end up where he's pretty much the Red Dragon anyway.
Could have done the same thing with the painting that was in his house, and that's why he wanted to burn the house down.
Yeah, easily could have done that, or just make sure that painting had a lot of lighter fluid on it before you lit that match. You know.
Yeah.
You didn't need this like detour So yeah, it was just a weird, questionable scene.
And like you said, like he just kind of knocks them out. He doesn't hurt them any further. Like I think even like as dark as that is, like I think if he had done something to them, it would have at least been in line with the character. You know, but he just kind of escapes, and it felt flimsy, and I didn't really understand why it was there.
Is there anything else about Reba you want to talk about, or should we get onto some other side characters?
I think that there's probably some bigger meaning there with her being blind and, you know, his obsession with sight and stuff like that. I think that, you know, from a sort of like a novelization standpoint, I'm sure that was kind of fleshed out in a way that made you think that maybe there was something redeemable there. But on film, I don't think in either scenario really translates to that. Dollarhide is out of his mind, and there wasn't really a good reason to spend a lot of time with either of those characters. So my only point about all of this is I like that they did it really quickly in the original because we got past it and got back to the action.
What do you think about, oh, actually, maybe I want to talk about this a little bit, his turn when he sees her sort of, I guess, what he thinks in his mind is cheating. It was portrayed pretty interestingly in Manhunter, I thought. We had that song playing. We have a pretty decent soundtrack in that original Manhunter. Throwing some pop songs. Yeah, he's just kind of in his van, and he's watching Reba get dropped off by her coworker, and he's kind of just reaching for her cheek. You don't really see a kiss or anything, but like it's all like playing out in his mind, like this true love is like blossoming like between these two people, and then like that white glow that he would see sometimes is occurring there too. Then he just like rips the leather off of his the interior of his car, and then just kills that dude right there. And kidnaps Reba.
He's really strong in the original too. They don't talk about that enough.
Really strong. I think they I think they did maybe like if you want to talk about humanizing, I think they did a better portrayal of him kind of dealing with the fact that like maybe she doesn't love me. Like I think like he was in a lot of anguish there in Manhunter. Like just sitting in the car, just watching the two of them. It's like the scene plays out a longer, definitely, than it did in Red Dragon. And that was like the only time I felt like maybe any sympathy for this guy, just because like he was really hurting there. And I didn't get that in Red Dragon. It was a lot quicker. We don't get a cool song to play over while the guy is with her. And this guy in the remake was actively pursuing her.
Yeah.
So it would make sense for him to be more jealous. But we don't really stay with Ray Fiennes while the two of them are doing their thing. We stay more with Reba for some reason instead of dealing with Dollarhide's anguish. I know we're supposed to sympathize with Dollarhide more in the remake because, like, you know, of his upbringing and maybe if things were done differently. But at that scene, I definitely felt more for Dollarhide in Manhunter.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you came back around because I actually agree. Like in Red Dragon, after they interact, like he doesn't handle it well. Obviously, he's like, "Get out, gotta get out, like get out of my van," and like it was just it was kind of disappointing for me because in the original, like I said, yes, is it ham-fisted? Is it quick? Does it make a lot of sense? No. But at least like after they interact, he's like, when can I see you again?
Right.
And like he's built up this relationship in his mind so that when he sees what he thinks he's seeing, he has this adverse reaction because he, at this point, had basically claimed possession of her. He thought that she was just another kind of thing for him to own in a sense. And like you mentioned, the glow, that actually comes into play because, you know, again, it builds out Graham again in a weird way because Graham is starting to see a glow. And, you know, the 80s music really intensifies with this glowing effect. It actually, for whatever reason in my head, I had like the Last Dragon song in my head. You ever see that movie?
Last Dragon.
It's Bruce Leroy. It's kind of like a blaxploitation film, like Shona. Well, that's fine, but like there's an 80s song in that, and it's like, you are the last dragon, you got the glow, and like I just kept playing that through my head. But like, yeah, he has this intense light that he sees. he's seeing something that's not happening at all. The guy's like, "Oh, you got a smudge on your face."
Pollen. That's what it was.
Yeah, it sets him off. Like, and that to me makes more sense that he lost control in a fit of rage versus I'm at the Brooklyn Museum and I'm gonna like hit that lady with the same. I hope you notice it's the same weapon from Death Wish.
No, it wasn't. Was it?
It wasn't quite. It wasn't rolled up pennies, but
Okay.
it was still a blackjack. He hit her with some kind of
one of those things that I see people knock other people out in the back of the head with.
Yeah, often in James Bond movies that Sean Connery's in. But I'm making too many references. But no, I think you're right. Like that felt more sort of sympathetic and humanizing, and that really doesn't make sense because the remake is the more sympathizing, humanizing moment. But like, I just think the raw kind of like emotion of it felt more real.
Yeah.
Whereas, like you said in the remake, you were asking questions like, "What was the purpose?" And I can't really answer that myself. Like, I don't know why he felt the need to burn down the house with her. You know?
Now, should we maybe go on to some other side characters?
Yeah, let's do it.
We could mention the family a little bit before. They're not heavy in either film, but they definitely help us flesh out the Graham character, so definitely important. So I'll just go over their names really quickly. The wife of William Graham, her name is Molly, portrayed by Kim Greist in Manhunter.
William, you're gonna make yourself sick or get yourself killed.
And Mary Louise Parker in Red Dragon.
How is young Josh and the lovely Molly?
Then we have the sons, the only name that is changed, even from the book. I forget what the name in the book was, but in Manhunter, it's Kevin, portrayed by David Seaman, and then in Red Dragon, it's Josh, portrayed by Tyler Patrick Jones. You had mentioned before that we get a little bit more of the family in Manhunter. Maybe you wanted to elaborate on that now?
Yeah, just because I do want to spend more time with the wife and not that much time with the son because there's not really a reason to.
Sure.
I'll say this, that Kevin really kills it in that grocery scene where they talk about, his mental health. That's about the only reason you need Kevin or Josh to be a small, vulnerable child, which, just kind of ups the ante of like the danger of like the serial killer coming after him. Because I think what I like about the original film is that there's more emphasis played on the family. So like I'm seeing the family. It's just like the leads or I forget the name of the other family. So like I'm seeing the same kind of setup for what the killer's trying to kill. And like I'm more nervous for them. And especially Josh getting that time to like talk to his dad and really learn more about him. I mean, the closest equivalent in the remake comes towards the end, in which the kid's life is threatened, when Josh's life is threatened. But other than that, there's nothing to him, in that remake.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin even gets a little more time with the dad in the original because it begins pretty much with like him and his dad like building this sort of gate or not like a fence around this like turtle's nest, right? Because they live on the beach, then the turtles are born, they got to get to the sea. If they don't have protection, the crabs will eat them all. So he's just having this like little conversation with his son. It's small, but it's father-son moment, and it comes back in the ending too. So, we just get to see Graham just be a dad sometimes, which is important. Like you said, the grocery store scene, that's like a very important scene. Really gets into Graham's like just mind space, just what happens to him when he goes after these serial killers. We don't get equivalent at all in the remake for the grocery store scene, and there's no like threat of the dad, like you mentioned before. Like the Kevin in Manhunter is just like, I'm in the kitchen, Mom. He's like, why does he have to announce? He just wants me to know where he is at all times. He's like, what? My own son just doesn't think you're safe when it's just you and me. So it really just helps flesh out just his character more. You just get to see him being father more, and then just the danger. We know that he's a little more dangerous in Manhunter. So definitely points to the son in the original, and I think we're going to probably agree with the wife in the original too. So if you want to pivot there.
Sure. I'll say before I do the full pivot, I'm glad you bring up the opening scene because like I said, it's a small scene with the fence and stuff like that. But like if you, because it's cinema and you can think about this, he might be saying something in that moment. You know, when you really break it down, because like he's built this sort of gate to keep out, you know, coyotes, dogs, whatever it is. Um, but like he also mentions that you have to extend and put that wire, that gating underground too. So it reminds me again of this Graham character, which is you can't just build up the fence on the outside where everyone can see. There's something underneath that you got to protect from too. And I think that perhaps that is intentional. I imagine it is because it's a movie. And like it just again, like you mentioned, it fleshes things out. And it's like you're sitting there like, I'm learning more about Graham in these small interactions with his son. And to your point on the pivot, with his wife as well. So I mean, when you're looking at Kim Grice in the original film, it's not even like you're spending that much time with her. Like they kind of like bang twice, like throughout the film. But like she's much more concerned. At least when I watched it, that's how I felt. She's much more concerned about him getting back into it because the mental health is a part of it. You know, in Mary Louise Parker's scenario, like the only reason for her not to do it, and she kind of mentioned it, is for kind of like her own selfish desire to have her husband around. But like Kim Grice has to worry about her husband coming back, not just physically from this crime, but like mentally. And like she does not want to go through the scenario of him like being back in the psych ward, you know. And it just comes into play more often. Like when Hannibal gives up his address, it matters more because it's the kind of I told you so moment. It's like, I told you not to dive back into this life. And he's responsible, Graham is, for bringing this danger into his family's life, which is true in the other film. But it matters more because we know a little bit more about their relationship. We get to see it play out a little bit more. It's like you cast Mary Louise Parker, who's a very strong actress, and you didn't really use her. It's just, it's a weird kind of conundrum. It's like you spend so much more time with Lecter in the remake. You spend so much more time with the other love interests. And is it very important to spend time with the family? Not really, but it does help build out the character. And I'm glad they did it in the original.
Molly, the character Molly, just has a lot more to do in the original. Whether if it's just like, you know, the occasional, you know, bang that they do, or maybe just a phone call, you know? And, you know, he really confides in his wife. And it's really just, I don't know, it just seems like a more equal partnership. Like he really thought what she had to say was just like equally important. It's like sometimes I just need my wife, you know, to get me through this. And you didn't see Ed Norton need to go to his wife at all for anything. So when the ending comes, it's not as impactful as it would have been if that ending happened in Manhunter.
And you get to see more of the tension, like when they fight about painting the kitchen, you know, like that matters because he's not handling a pretty mundane conversation very well because the stress of his job. When he's basically lying to her about his involvement in the case, and he's saying, "Oh no, see, they just had me doing, you know, a couple things. I'm on the outside. I'm not really involved." He doesn't want to tell his wife that he talked to Hannibal Lecter. Like that is a secret that he's trying to keep from his wife. And when it causes the potential like serial killer finding out where they live and all that, there's a consequence to his actions. And like there are consequences to Graham's actions in the original film that Ed Norton just doesn't seem to have the same consequences. And, you know, it's okay that he doesn't, but like, you know, if we're going to compare characters and flesh them out, I think they spend a lot more time with the Tooth Fairy, the Red Dragon in the remake, and a lot less time with Graham. And that plays out very much so. And again, neither situation has a lot of screen time, but the screen time does matter when they use it in the original. So I got to point to the family in the original as a stronger portrayal of the family, even with what we know about the ending.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Maybe we should go there now, since we've talked about all our characters that are important to the ending.
Did you want to talk? I mean, did you want to talk at all about like the Keitel and the other?
We could, but I feel like maybe because we're already talking about the family, and the ending is really, the family is pretty important for the remake ending. So maybe we could just go there and then come back to the other characters, since they are really minor compared to
I agree.
Okay. All right, so we're talking about the family, and we keep talking about this ending. So let's just go there, Reggie. Let's talk about the endings and the differences. I'm going to start with the ending of the original. So Manhunter.
Thought you would. This is one time where you should switch it.
So in Manhunter, pretty much they finally figured out who the killer is. It's this Dollarhide character. They get an address. So Will, his SWAT team, they go to Dollarhide's residence. At this point, Dollarhide's already kidnapped Reba. He's kind of just fucking with her at this point, blasting god-awful Inagata Devita at full blast.
Iron Butterfly.
Yeah. And he's just, it's a little cheesy to pick that song. I mean, to be fair. And
I agree with her, by the way. Why are you doing this? You sick bastard.
So he's playing that music, just kind of toying with her. And Will is just like, as soon as they get to the location, like, first of all, it's pretty funny because they pull up there, they kill the lights, and then the other cop car that's with them crashes like into the ravine or something. It's like, Jesus, these are some amateurs you guys brought with you.
I'm all right, but he's hurt pretty bad, so we'll just stick back here.
Yeah.
So what?
So it's weird. They gotta wait for the SWAT. Will's like, screw that, I'm going. He runs. He sees that Reba's in danger, so he's running.
Oh my god.
He's running in slow motion. We got fucking Inagata Devita. It's during that fucking long-ass instrumental break, and as soon as Will crashes through, we're back to the main riff. Dun, 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 dun. It couldn't get any. That's the cheesiest moment of the movie, but I'll allow it because I enjoyed the ride so far.
So good.
And then Will, genius he is, what does he do? He jumps right into fucking Dollarhide's arms. Dollarhide, much stronger, just throws him like a piece of paper, just slams him right into the fridge. Will is down and out. And then a lot of the condiments fall out. A lot of ketchup's down there. So I'm thinking he's bleeding out. But no, it's just fucking ketchup. And then Dollarhide's like, well, shit, there's probably more cops coming. Gets a shotgun. Cops come. He's just like the Terminator at this point. Just taking them out. These guys are flying. It's pretty crazy. He goes back into the kitchen. He's going to take out Will now, but then Will pretty much just shoots him with these bullets.
He did miss Will for those condiments, so, you know. Good. For some reason, he shoots a bunch of, like, jars.
Yeah, he has good shots when it's other cops, when it's Will, he just can't shoot him. So ultimately, Will is able to kill Dollarhide right there. He's just kind of hugs Reba. He's like, I'm Will Graham. It's going to be okay. Killer's dead. We'll save Reba. And then we go back to the beach house. And I'm pretty sure Will didn't tell his family that he was there, that he kind of needed some time just to reset. But they show up anyway. And then he just tells them that, like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. I needed some time, but I actually am okay. And then we go back to the turtles again. And that's kind of how our movie ends with, what? What does it end with? Freeze frame.
Heartbeat, heartbeat, listen to the heartbeat.
And I don't know, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of input. Because I watched the director's cut, I will say that there is a scene, and it is completely unnecessary, but fleshes out the film. There's a scene after he kills Dollarhide and before he goes to the beach house where he's a little beat up. It's like a rainy day, and he goes to, like, the family that Dollarhide was casing, the one that he kind of saved him from. And, like, they're like, oh, wow, you're that cop. Like, the wife answers the door, and then the husband says, yeah, hey. Like, and it's awkward. They're like, you want anything? You want to, like, come in? He's like, no, I just wanted to see you. And then, you know, lightning, and then he just, like, leaves. It's so weird. Like, it's
Good cut.
It is a good cut, but, like, it does reinforce this idea of, like, is Graham
back, or is he crazy?
Right. So, like, you don't need it there at all. Like, it's actually, like, completely sandwiching and pointless. But, you know, just fleshing that idea out a little bit more. but you could just do exactly what they did in the theatrical cut, which was cut right through. I'll say this about the ending: the action ramps up in that film so much in a fun, ridiculous way, as you mentioned. Like as soon as he kind of understands, like the padlock, the lights, the eyes, and like they're on helicopters, he's screaming into, "Give me the driver's license!" And it's like it's just so much crazy shit happening. Like he said, when the cop car crashes for no reason and the guy like smashes his head, like all this amped up 80s action. There is nothing more beautiful, like you said, than Inagata Devita playing and William Peterson just smashing through that window. Like, it's a window. Shoot him.
Yeah, you could have shot him, man.
You know where he is. Like, what are you doing, bro? Look, let me tell you something. I love it. I love the random Terminator shit, like the collateral damage that just didn't need to happen. It's just a fun little romp. Just the idea that he's got like the killer's got the glass on Reva and he's about to do it, and it's the whole thing is just a lot more fun. I'll say ridiculous, yes. Freeze frame, dumb. But like I like 80s cheese a bit, man. Like the music really, for as cheesy as it was, it really started kind of hyping me up. I was like, let's go, let's get that sick son of a bitch, and I had a lot of fun with it. Let's just put it that way.
It's fun for sure. I'll give you that. I don't know if it was entirely the ending I thought I wanted or anything like that. Probably wasn't. I mean, it's always hard when you have these great villains. It's like, how do you take them down? It's never as satisfying as I want it to be. So like just them kind of pretty much having a shootout at the end. It wasn't what I wanted. It's not how I wanted Dollarhide to go. But I enjoyed it. I guess the film bought enough good faith at that point where I was willing to go with whatever they had at this point. I think Will was a little stupid at the end, just jumping through that window, but you know, it made for a cool moment with the music. So cheesy, not quite what I wanted, but overall I'd say a fine ending. I mean, it was a weird movie. So you kind of needed that weird Inagata Devita, and Inagata Devita was chosen by Michael Mann because there was like another serial killer. Like he would use that song. It's like for like as a connection between him and his victims. They were all women. I forgot the serial killer's name, but like he would use that song to connect himself with these women victims. That's why he chose that song.
Interesting.
It does seem a little out of place because the whole time we have like it's very synth heavy the score for the soundtrack, and every time it's like a pop song, it's like very 80s like drums and synth, all that stuff. So when you hear like this old psychedelic rock song coming out of nowhere, and it's like a very famous one, so that's kind of what irked me about it. It's like this song I've already heard before. Like I didn't mind the heartbeat, I didn't mind the song when he saw Reva kissing the guy, because I had never heard these songs in a movie before. But like, and Inagata Devita, it's like, all right, it's got a little cheesy here, but overall I was fine with the ending.
I agree. It's a tonal shift, but like you said, the goodwill was there, and like actually, like at that point, I was kind of okay with like the palate cleanser of just like, fuck it, we're going in. Like I thought it was a lot of fun. Again, tonally, does it make sense? Like you have this kind of like plotting, sort of slow burn, you know, these back and forth conversations with like this really smart Lecter guy, and then just at the end, I don't care, I'm gonna jump through a window. And again, like from a policing standpoint, like he would have a lot of questions to answer for, because 2 cops basically died because he like threw caution to the wind. Maybe 3 because of the guy in the car for some reason. Look, I liked it. It definitely showed its age in that moment, the movie. But I thought it was fine, and like you said, Inagata Devita was a little too on the nose, but I did appreciate how menacing it was, because it reminded me of the lunch scene again. Like the fact that she's in the house, she doesn't know what's going on and where he is, and he's just really messing with her psychologically. I found that to be in line with what I expect from the character, so I was okay with the ending. It seemed to me like the villain stayed smart and the cops got dumb, and I was okay with that. Yeah,
I guess that's probably what my problem was. It was like, because we had been seeing Will Graham, like this very smart, very meticulous person, just like very logical person, and then all of a sudden just fuck all that shit, I gotta run through this glass, man. So it's just like, what are you doing, man? And then even or even our killer, who just seems like very methodical. It just like fuck it, I'm just getting a shotgun and just killing everybody. So
Right.
yeah, it definitely just seemed like, where did all this action come from this movie that was like very like just like intellectually driven, and all of a sudden just
Mhm.
like this brawl out or shootout at the end. So it was weird, but I'll go with it.
Now the remake,
The remake.
the remake. So you get sort of similar scene where the other coworker is taking Reba home, and he's about to go on vacation. He's like, you might want to avoid that dollar high guy since he's so like emotional. Um, and he's really trying to like hit on her. He definitely wants there to be a thing there. And Ralph Fiennes basically gets furious, not in the same way. He doesn't like rip up his interior of his van, but he's mad. He shoots the guy, which again, it just when you talk about tonal shift as well, I think starting in the Brooklyn Museum to this point, tonally, the movie to me is starting to do some of the same things as the first film, which is like, why is he shooting people in broad daylight? I mean, it's not broad daylight, but like, why are you just on the front porch shooting a guy? Like that doesn't fit your character, you know. I just wasn't sure what changed for him in that moment. Whereas like in the original, it was very obvious that he went nuts, more or less. And then the next scene you have Reba in the house, and like he wakes her up, and we're back in the Dollar Hyde estate, and he's rambling about. Were you able to follow this anyway? Like his ramble about he'll hear us.
He'll hear us. I don't know, because like, is there a red dragon upstairs? Is he the red dragon? I'm not exactly sure. Because he had a painting like that upstairs too, but we didn't see him eat that one. So is
Right.
the painting control that he has? See, this is where it just gets confusing, because it's these voices that he's hearing.
Mhm.
It's like, I think, well, I read that there actually was like a voice. Frank Langella, I think is the actor's name, actually did
Yeah.
some voiceovers, and Brett Ratner just took them out at
Good.
the last minute. So maybe that would have made it a little more clear what he was doing and who he was talking to. But yeah, that's what we got.
I think that's a good cut because I think that would have sucked. It's weird because Reba's still kind of there, like as much as menacing as he is, she still is kind of like holding out hope because she enjoyed their interaction. She likes him, and she's scaring. I mean, he's scaring her, and for what we know as the people that have been following this kind of like serial killer story, we know that she should be afraid and she really shouldn't be trying to interact with this guy anymore. And then it just kind of goes, like I said, it goes into crazy town. It's like, all right, he's worried about the voice upstairs, so he starts to burn the house down. Let's just get to it. It's a fake out ending. He shoots himself as the house is burning down, and Reba's like, holy shit, the house is on fire. How can I get out? She feels the body and realizes that he is shot, and I mean, more or less just kind of like escapes on her own, and the cops show up a little too late, more or less. But that's not what really happened, because that body was the coworker he just shot in the other scene, which we find out minutes later in the movie. I don't know, like I just even trying to describe this, like I think it's starting to bug me. Like I feel like I'm rambling, but basically what happened. Like he got mad, shot the other guy, kidnapped her, woke her up in the house, started to burn the house down because the painting was still upstairs and he's still hearing voices. And he says the only way they can be free is if he shoots her and he shoots himself. That's not what happens. He shoots seemingly himself, but it turns out it's a coworker, and now the killer's still on the loose. You want to try to take it from there? Because
Yeah, sure.
I'm
you did a fine job. At that point, then like Will just like introduces himself to Reba and all that stuff at the hospital, and then Will's also given the book that was in the safe, because it was in a safe, didn't burn down. So Will gets this book, and then it's like some time has passed. Also put on a side note, that coworker said he was going on vacation for a week, so that's why nobody knew he was missing. Anyways, so he's back at his beach house with his family, just talking. He's saying that he read the book, the journal, and he does feel bad for the guy because he had a shitty life. Sure, humanize him, whatever. And then he's like wondering where his son is. I'm skipping some stuff, but he's wondering where his son is, and then he notices a broken mirror, and then we start seeing a lot more broken mirrors. And so we know that Dollar Hyde is alive in there. And then I think somebody gets informed that the bones are not really Dollarhide's, that they are the coworkers, and nobody knew it was him because because he was away on vacation. So
we didn't talk about the character yet. That was Harvey Keitel got the call.
We'll get to that because he's really a minor character. So he finds the killer. He's got his son, and then he sees his son has peed himself. So he does there's some psychology stuff here. He remembers what he read in that journal, so he turns it on his son, and he kind of berates him the same way that a young Dollarhide was berated by his mother. And this throws Dollarhide off guard, and then the kid's able to get free. A little scuffle ensues, and I don't exactly remember what happens. A door closes, and then Dollarhide's kind of gotten away, but then Molly comes in the house, and then I don't know. He just waits, looking at her feet like through the bottom of the door, and then he sees Dollarhide come out, tells her to duck. It's kind of a cool thing that happens. There's a little shootout through like a door. Nobody could see. Everyone's just firing blindly. Both guys get shot. Both are injured. And then ultimately, like, Molly goes to check on Graham. He's okay, but then Dollarhide's still alive. She gets the gun. She's the one that kills our serial killer. Not our hero, his wife. And pretty much after that, the movie ends.
Yeah, so...
Oh, no. I'm sorry. No, the movie does not end there. We get a little PS scene here. Will's on his boat, and he's got a letter, or maybe phone call, I don't know, something from Dr. Lecter, just telling him, like, good job, Will, you did it. And
how did it feel?
How does it feel to have killed and whatever, I don't know. And then that's when we get a little teaser. The doctor comes in, he says, the other doctor, not Dr. Lecter, I forgot his name, Dr. Chilton, I think, actually. He comes in, he's like, there's a young lady from the FBI here to see you. She's very young, very pretty. But I'll tell you, you don't want to see her. And then that's, a little teaser for Silence of the Lambs. So I guess we're led to believe this happens right before or this is happening maybe during the Buffalo Bill thing.
Yeah, dude. We got a real serial killer problem in this country.
So that's how it ends. Like I said before, the movie starts with Hannibal, and of course it ends with Hannibal. Because that's pretty much why you're here, right? You want to see this Hannibal character. That's why we made this remake, right? So you can see Hannibal. All right, so that's the details of the ending and the remake. Where do you want to start unpacking that?
I hate fake outs. I hate fake outs, man. Let's put it this way. What we were kind of getting at before with like the love interest and stuff like that, things start to shift again, and the problem is like this remake, because all this groundwork is laid out and it's well done, and we have high expectations for a Hannibal movie with Anthony Hopkins in it. Some of these tonal shifts, whereas in the 80s movie, I'm like, look at that, it's being all 80s now. That's fun. And this, I just start getting confused because I'm like, when did everyone get dumb? Like everyone was really smart a couple minutes ago. And now we're going to the Brooklyn Museum and hitting people over the head and shooting guys and, with no cover and burning down the house and then swapping bodies and no one noticed. Like it just felt a little strange. I guess apparently it's like more in line with the actual book itself. I don't know, like all the good that came from that scene just felt undercut by the fact that we didn't flesh out the wife. So I don't care if Mary Louise Parker shot Dollarhide. I don't really care. I guess it's cool that Ed Norton got the book and he was able to use that information against the killer to like save his son. I mean, kind of a harsh scene. He has to be mean to his son to save his life. But like, I don't know. The whole thing just starts to feel a little pointless to me. Like the killer shows up and he's looking for his gun, and the guy's outside and he's looking under the door and the feet, and I'm just like, I don't know how we really got here. Like it just felt a little pointless to me, but it wasn't the worst thing that ever happened. I just I felt like the tonal shift. I had a different reaction to the tonal shift in the remake because I think I was holding it to a higher standard than the original. So that's mostly what I have to say about that. I just don't really like fake out endings.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The fake outs, not really a big fan of them. Yeah, it would have been a more impactful ending in the remake if we had spent time with the family at all. if it was like I said before, if it was the wife from the original, if it was the kid from the original that they're in danger, I care about those people.
Yep.
I don't care about this family in the remake. I mean, Mary Louise Parker, yeah, great actress. Totally underutilized in this movie. And give her the kill. I don't know if that happened in the book, but I mean, I get it. Like we did like one thing of target practice with her, like kind of in the middle of the movie when they had to relocate them, and then we're making her the killer of Dollarhide. I don't know. It left me wanting more for sure.
Even her reaction, because she is such a good actress, like her visceral reaction to having like taken a life was very well done from an acting standpoint. Like she's like invisible, like agony about what has just happened. Still don't care. I still don't care, and that's a bit unfortunate. And again, like 80s cheese is 80s cheese, and then this Ed Norton on the ground after taking way too many bullets. Even Hannibal at the beginning of the movie was shot so many times. Like, why is he alive? I'm not too sure. Like Ed Norton shouldn't be alive either, and he's like, shoot him. It's just like, all right, like I guess, like you needed him to tell you to like make sure it's done. You know, I don't know. A very solid foundation that just kind of like the ending, like you mentioned, left a lot to be desired. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but I was kind of over it at that point because I didn't really care about the family.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't the worst ending. It was an okay ending, but like because we don't really know the family in the remake, it just doesn't have the impact it would if it was the family from the original. That would have been like, that would have freaked me out if it was that family. I would have been so fucking nervous for them. But I don't know these people, so it kind of sucks. It's like you have this hero, and then just like, well, he's not gonna do it. It's gonna be her that we barely saw in the movie. You know, it's like, and maybe if it fleshed her out, if it was the wife from the original, would have been totally fine with it.
Right.
This wife, I don't know you.
And you're not even talking about a lot of screen time. You're talking about like maybe an extra minute of screen time, and like I care.
Yeah. So those are the endings.
You know, of course, a little bit of fan service. I mean, like you said, people are here for Anthony Hopkins to an extent, so it's cool. It's like, oh, what's her name? I bet it's Clarice. Like, that was fun. It was actually a letter, by the way, that that Hannibal had given him because Will reads the letter, balls it up, and throws it into the ocean because he's a litterer.
He didn't learn any lessons. He's still gonna be a jerk.
Yeah, but like I said, those are the endings. You know, neither of them were fantastic endings, but you know, they got the job done.
Yeah, I guess choosing, I'd have to go with the original, just because. I do hate fake outs, and like I didn't care about those people. I didn't care about the family. I was just really happy that he was back with his family at the end of the original, but I didn't really care so much at the end of the remake. So
honestly, too, I really didn't care about Will either, to be honest, because he's a very, like I said, Norton's a good actor, but it's a very straightforward character. It's like the term I like to use. He's a bit of a Boy Scout, and it's just like, okay, like the other guy was so conflicted. I was nervous about his well-being more so than this other Graham, because the other Graham felt like he was going to be fine anyway. Like even in that scene where his family got attacked, I was like, oh, maybe they'll kill him, maybe they won't. But it never felt like he was in any real danger throughout the film.
I got nothing really else to say about that. We do have some minor characters we could just talk about a little bit because there are some differences there. All right, so let's start with Jack Crawford. He's the guy that brings Will back. Once he's out, pull him back in. He's the guy that pulls him back in, Reggie. So we have Dennis Farina in Manhunter and Harvey Keitel in the remake. Yes, Harvey Keitel's in this movie. We barely talked about him. I think you kind of said this before, so I'll just start with it. Lecter gets a lot more to do, so that takes away from a lot of the other characters. So Jack Crawford in the remake for sure gets a lot less to do because Will's talking more with Hannibal.
Like you mentioned, Farina, when he says that he feels kind of like guilty about bringing him back in, I actually believe it a bit more because like what we do see with Will and his struggle, we know how difficult it was for him to come out of retirement. And Dennis Farina plays that really well. It's like, yeah, they're friends, but like also he's being used more or less. It's like, look, I don't really care what happens to you, Will, but what I do care about is catching this killer quickly. And he even has a conversation with his own wife in the film, which is like, again, saying the same thing. It's like, you're supposed to be his friend. Like, well, how did you do that to him?
Yeah.
And we understand his motivation a little bit more. We don't really need him that fleshed out, but he's in so many more scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he's not doing anything, just him being around. It's like, I'll tell you when I've had enough, or like all that stuff. It does ultimately matter, like their relationship. So he's got more to do. Whereas Harvey Keitel, to me,
He's in the movie, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, other than him asking him to get involved, I really don't even remember much outside of that. They have the same kind of fight about like, you brought me into this, so I'm gonna do what it takes. You know, Graham tells him that, but like it's not as impactful in the remake, and it doesn't really matter if Harvey Keitel was there or not in the Red Dragon.
Yeah, I barely remember Harvey Keitel in Red Dragon. All his good stuff really went to Hannibal, and you do want more Hannibal in your movie, but Jack Crawford's still a pretty important character, and Dennis Farina, he does a really great job too to sort of help us be more in awe of Will Graham in the process. There's this one great scene in the Manhunter when Will's just watching the videotapes and he's just like, so you know the dog even though he didn't have a collar. You knew the cat even though he didn't have a collar. And you brought the deadbolt. Why'd you bring that? And he's just like putting together these pieces. And you just see like Dennis Farina's reaction. It's just like watching the wheels turn in Will's head. It's simple, but it's really effective because like he's just blown away by like all these connections that Will is able to make in that instance, just from just like these minor details. He's like, wait a minute, he knows it because he's watched the videos. So check the video company. He's like, well, the one video is from here, but the other video is from here. Well, they would have went out to somebody. Lift the label. Where's that from? I know it. And then like it's kind of cheesy. Will's kind of got his hand up to the window, like he's kind of getting it from the universe or something.
Yeah.
But after all that whole scene, like Dennis Farina's just like, what the fuck just happened? How did you do that? So, you know, not the best character, but he does a lot to really service Will and his just the whole process of like getting into the mindset of a serial killer.
I agree.
Really great.
He's a supporting character. I mean, the scene when they're going to take in the Red Dragon, Dennis Farina says, well, you're not going to need that gun. SWAT's going to handle it. Mm-hmm. And like it ramps up the tension and makes you understand that the way Will is acting is not rational, logical at all. It's like, hey, Will, I don't know why you're getting all jazzed up because you did your part. Your part was to figure out who it was and where he is. Everything else is leave it back to us. Like, no reason I even got you involved. Like you said, in those small moments, it makes a huge difference. So, I mean, Dennis Farina definitely, because he's just in more scenes, and like you say, it's not even that saying words, it's just his reactions. They go a long way in the movie. I think you're 100% right about that. So I definitely know why he's in the movie. I'm not sure I know why Harvey Keitel's in the movie. Yeah. Which, to your point, Crawford is an important character. So what happened?
Yeah, he's very important in the first Silence of the Lambs movie. I like I said, brought in Hannibal. You got to give him more scenes. He's going to take more of your stuff. Is that all right, Harvey? Yeah, I guess. That's honestly what I think what happened. I don't know if there are deleted scenes. I didn't look into it, but yeah, Harvey Keitel, pretty pointless. Dennis Farina, very serviceable, supporting character. The other character I just want to talk about a little bit is our Lowndes character, our journalist who's we hate because he took pictures of Will Graham after Lecter stabbed him. We have somebody returning from our Conan episode, Stephen Lang.
Open your eyes. If you don't open your eyes, I'll staple your eyelids to your forehead. Is your nature to do one thing correctly?
And Philip Seymour Hoffman.
It's true, the Lecter's actually helping with your investigation.
What am I doing here?
Big name, Philip Seymour Hoffman. I don't know, it's like, again, just like Harvey Keitel, you bring this huge actor to play this role, and you don't really do anything with him.
Yeah. Like, Lang, to me, just had much more of an impact in the film in terms of just the way he portrays Lowndes is like kind of like wise guy, smart ass, who like really gets under your skin. Whereas like Philip Seymour Hoffman, I didn't get that same take from him. I really didn't get much of a beat on him at all, other than I know Graham didn't like him. I don't know, like that Lowndes in the original seems to be like in a lot of ways one-upping our lead in a certain aspect, and it's kind of like fascinating because he plays this kind of like dick. You're like, you're not too worried at first when he gets like captured because like, oh yeah, he's kind of getting his comeuppance. But like Lang's reaction to the killer, I think we talked a lot about that scene with Tom Noonan and the stocking on his face and stuff like that. But like a lot of that is Stephen Lang's reaction. It's like, oh God, no. Like what? Please, not me. And like again, Seymour Hoffman does the same thing. I kind of don't like that whatever they put him on was sticky.
It was like super glue, which is like fucked up as shit. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is a shittier scenario because Stephen Lang was just tied up, but like Philip Seymour Hoffman stripped to his underwear, like super vulnerable. And then you're stuck with super glue. It's like, oh boy, this ain't gonna end good.
Yeah, and like again, it's a small thing, but we even hear Stephen Lang in the moment reading the note.
Yeah,
it's all these little things that make a huge difference. And I don't know, like Stephen Lang's Lounge just felt more defined to me than Philip Seymour Hoffman.
What do you hear? What do you say? I love that. Anyways, yeah, I'll agree with you. Stephen Lang's portrayal, I thought was the better of the two. Just going back to their characters, like you said, Stephen Lang's this arrogant asshole guy. Well, Philip Seymour Hoffman just comes across kind of maybe he's a dick, but not really like above like anybody in the film. He seems like he's pretty much like the lowest of the low here. So it's great what Stephen Lang does because he comes across as this arrogant asshole, and then when he's kidnapped by our killer, and then it's just like to see how pathetic he becomes gives the villain a little more credibility because like, oh, you made this guy fucking crack? Okay.
Right.
So that's great. And like you said, having him read that note, and we could see him in the terror when he has to read it, as opposed to the remake where we just get like kind of this weird montage where we hear the recording while they're trying to solve stuff. It's I don't know, it definitely doesn't have the same impact.
Yeah, I just didn't get it. Like spend some more time in that scene. I think, like you mentioned, because we'd seen Ralph Fiennes before in the movie, and like, I guess they didn't think that they needed to spend as much time there. This, in the original, this is our introduction to the killer.
Yeah.
And it's with the backdrop of this guy who has been kind of shitty to our lead. Like, he keeps writing all these articles about his mental health, and he takes photos of him when he's like not in a good position. So like he's putting Will Graham's life and family in danger as well. That just comes across more in the original. So like when they have to like take the photo with each other, there's animosity that just came across much more organically in the original film. And then, like you said, even though we don't like him, hey, I wouldn't want that to happen to my worst enemy. Like I don't want. That's horrible to see. And I just felt like they pulled less punches in that scene. Like it's just so creepy. And Stephen Lang really, really like helps us know just how bad this killer is. There's no real comparison here in my book. Like, and Philip Seymour Hoffman is one of the greatest actors that ever lived.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, just underutilized once again.
Any other characters you want to talk about, or I think we pretty much got them all?
Not really. I mean, there's some interactions with cops and his mental health, but like everyone that mattered, we talked about.
Yeah. All right. I mean, that's all I really have for characters. I did want to just talk a little bit about the music, though.
Oh yeah.
So we talked about this a little bit already, but let's talk about the soundtracks, Reggie. Like I said before, the Manhunter soundtrack, very synth-heavy soundtrack. And then we got some kind of pretty 80s sort of, not really pop songs, but they are pop songs, I guess.
They're pop songs.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's an interesting choice to kind of take a break from the action and just let these sort of pop songs just kind of take over. What do you think of that?
Typically, I feel like I would just say, what is going on with this music? But for some reason, the way they framed everything up and the way it kind of ramped up, because like as he was learning more about the situation and kind of getting more in the mind frame of the killer, like the music started to kind of ramp up, and like I don't know, it kind of works. It like really worked. Like you got this tiger thing. You're talking about the heartbeat, and I'm thinking about the heartbeat of the tiger now. And it's like I don't know why I liked it, but I did. It felt like it belonged there. Like even though nothing else in the film gave you a foreshadowing that this type of music was going to play such a a big part of it. But like by the end, they just really like they used the score to their advantage, and I think that it did help elevate the action. And I think that's why I was okay with this more pop sort of twist because it's not like they took away from this like psychological thriller because at this point it stopped being that and it started being solve the mystery, enough of that shit, it's time to like go crack some heads, and like it started working, man. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. It's just something about that synth soundtrack. It just there's like a sort of weird sense of like unease because that synth just keeps going sometimes, and it's just I think it's really fits with this sort of psychological thriller there because it's just like as Will's kind of like getting deeper into this world, it's just like his mind is just not so secure or just like stable anymore. So it really worked well with what was happening in the movie, and I didn't mind those kind of musical breaks where, okay, the music's just gonna kind of take over and we're just gonna hear some songs. Like the song that's playing when he's discovering Reba's like, or he thinks Reba's cheating on him. It's a weird song. It's sort of catchy. It's an interesting choice, but it works, and you just gotta give it to them. That they made some good choices with the music there.
I agree. I think the imagery made the music work as well. Like as he got deeper into that killer's mind, like I said, it should be really, really cheesy and campy, but like when you're seeing like the glow coming out of people's eyes and like and all that stuff, when you see him jump into the windows and stuff like that, like touching a tiger, like all this stuff, as I'm describing it, I'm like, does that make sense? Like if you told me I was watching a Hannibal movie and you're gonna be like, oh yeah, there's a guy who's gonna jump through a window and then get in a shotgun fight. Some blind chick's gonna touch a tiger. He's gonna go to the beach with his family. Like all this stuff, I'm like, I would say none of that should be in that movie. Take it out immediately. And it worked. It just started blending together in this really cool, clean way. And I wasn't even distracted by the music, which you think would have happened. I was just like, oh yeah, this makes sense for what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, it really does a good job of drawing you in. So it's like, if anything, I just was more focused during those weird musical moments. I'm like, I need to know what's happening because this is so fucking weird, but I love it.
Yeah. It like, I mean, to describe it, it hyped me up. Like I got excited that I was watching the movie again. It's not like I really had a moment where I was like bored or anything like that, but things started to pick up quickly because we were like I was saying before, we're past the point where you're trying to figure it out. We figured it out. Now it's go time, and the music was very much in line with that.
And then we have the music in the remake, Danny Elfman's score. Serviceable score, not as memorable as the Manhunter soundtrack for sure. There wasn't really any moments that sort of stuck out to me like they did in Manhunter. Like that music really does sort of just take over in that original film. It doesn't. There's no moments like that in the remake.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that jumps out at me. I mean, like you said, it's what a good score typically does, which is it creates the ambiance and stuff like that, but it doesn't get in the way.
Yeah.
But like the original, I am still thinking about the Heartbeat song. Like it's in my head now, and like for some reason that worked. Whereas like in the remake, it did exactly what it's supposed to do, but because it was so kind of, it's a good score, but it's so run of the mill kind of like it's what you would expect. I don't even think about it that much. But it wasn't bad at all. It was good.
Exactly. It wasn't bad, so it didn't get in the way, like you said. So absolutely fine score, but definitely not as memorable as what they did in Manhunter with that music.
Yeah.
It just sucks you in, man. Really cool.
I just gotta say that like a lot of what I like about that film are things that I typically don't like about movies. It's just they took some really interesting chances that could have like caused the whole thing to fall apart, but like all the parts kind of fit together. Like you mentioned, I mean, the slowest part really is when we do get into the love interest, but even that kind of like elevates the film as well. I don't know. I found it all to be very interesting. I wasn't expecting that at all.
All right, so we pretty much talked about all the characters, all the major differences, and the music. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Or should we just give our verdicts?
I think we should give our verdicts. I mean, like, it's a character-driven movie. We talked about characters.
There you go. All right. It is time. Reggie, should the remake Red Dragon exist?
As I was saying before, for whatever reason, I don't know why I had in my mind that we were watching Hannibal Rising, which is not good at all. I'll put it this way. When I saw Manhunter, I was pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed that film. But I wasn't so blown out of the water that I was like, this is sacred ground and no one should mess with this. Red Dragon has exactly what you would expect. It's got a good cast. Ed Norton's a great actor. Anthony Hopkins is the Hannibal Lecter, even though Brian Cox did a great job. It's Anthony Hopkins all day. He's in the movie quite a bit, so we get to see him. There's some telegraphing and foreshadowing that's a little unneeded in some points, but overall, I mean, Ralph Fiennes does an incredible job of fleshing out this Red Dragon character, even though I have some disagreements with how they do it. It fleshes out the story a lot more, and it follows apparently the original novel a lot more. I think it's a good remake. It's at least a good movie. I don't know if it's a great movie, but it's at least a good movie. And that remake should exist because I think it tells the story of Red Dragon more than the original, to be honest. So, and you definitely don't want to hit 80s movie notes in a 2000s remake. So I think it was a good film, and I'm glad that it exists. There's pros and cons of both films, and both of them have a reason to exist.
I'd seen the remake, like I said before, in the early 2000s, and I really liked it. I thought it was, not the best entry in the Hannibal series, but I thought it was very serviceable. Like you said, good cast, got Anthony Hopkins there. Ed Norton does a very serviceable job. Then I watched the original, and I realized it's pretty much doing the same thing beat for beat. They're not really doing anything new in the remake, and actually made some choices that I kind of questioned. And I don't know. I'm going to actually disagree with you, Reggie. I'm going to say Red Dragon should not exist.
Ooh.
It just follows the source material too closely, and it really didn't do anything to sort of make, come into its own. It even follows some of the dialogue, like, verbatim. And I'm just like, oh, man, they really didn't try to, do anything new here. And you just, honestly, you just did you just did Manhunter again, and you just put Anthony Hopkins in it. It's kind of what you did. And that's cool, but, I think Manhunter is just good enough where it's like, we didn't need the story told again, because you pretty much tell it exactly the same way. You just recast it. That's it. You didn't do anything new. So I was pretty bored watching that remake again. And I don't know, it just, I wasn't sucked in like I was with Manhunter, even though I was pretty sure I wouldn't get into Manhunter because I was sure it had that 80s cheese, but Michael Mann did it right. And I don't know. I don't think we need it again.
I can hear you on that because I'll put it this way: the villain is better in the original. The lead is better than the original. I mean, really, the only spot that you're not winning is Hannibal Lecter, but I mean, it's Anthony Hopkins reprising a role that he's done before. So
exactly.
I definitely get what you're saying. I think it falls in those different times where we've kind of flip-flopped on our reviews, and I'm falling into the camp of good enough. I definitely agree with you that Manhunter is the better film because it's just more interesting, all around. But I think what puts the remake over the top for me is Ralph Fiennes' excellent portrayal and him really diving into that character. If you take him out of the movie, I can't say this at all. But they do make several missteps with him as well, so I can see your review. Yeah. Sticking to my guns, I think the movie has some merit to exist, but I agree with you wholeheartedly that Manhunter is a superior film.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good film. If Manhunter did not exist, I'd be like, oh, this is great. Yeah, this is a great entry in the Hannibal series, but Manhunter does exist, and we didn't do anything new. So to me, it just felt like it was redundant, and it's like, you didn't try anything new. They could have just changed a couple things more here or there, and
they didn't do it.
You did the thing where you made the family the ending, and you cut them out, so it didn't matter. It was just some dumb choices. It didn't make sense.
They did eat a William Blake painting.
That's right. So they did that. Going to that stuff, like the dragon tattoo thing, they were gonna do that in the original too, but then they just ultimately decided not to do it. They thought it looked a little silly. So I guess they did that, and they were going to call it Red Dragon, but then the studio didn't like it because they thought it was too much like the Kung Fu movies coming out at the time. So people might think it was a Kung Fu movie. So they went with Manhunter, which everybody kind of hated, including Michael Mann. So I guess if you want a movie where it's named after the book, you can enjoy Red Dragon. But like ultimately for me, I just thought it's redundant. And just like, it's so stylized too, Manhunter. There's a lot of like monochromatic shots where like everything's blue or everything's green. It's really stylized and really cool. And do yourself a favor if you've only seen Red Dragon, people. Watch this original Manhunter.
100% agree. I mean, like you said, style, choices. I mean, even if you don't stick to the script, I mean, it made sense because it fit the era. Like it really did fit the 80s era, but like it's kind of like from a nostalgia standpoint, the best of that era. Like kind of like the things we like about that unique time in America. And yeah, no, I mean, look, I can't argue with you. It's a superior film. It's shot really well. Even with their budget and, you know, kind of quote unquote lack of star power relatively, it just holds its own. And I mean, William Peterson is a joy to watch in that film. And Tom Noonan is one of the creepiest villains that I've seen portrayed in film. So, I mean, I'm right there with you, man. Great movie.
All right. Well, that about concludes our review of the two films. So what did you guys think, huh? Who'd you agree with? Reggie or me? Feel free to defend Red Dragon. I liked Red Dragon when I first saw it. And then I thought I'd be fine with the remake, but it just didn't do anything new. Like once I saw like the original, I was like, wow, you didn't do anything. Okay.
Besides basically queuing up the fan service to say, hey, Silence of the Lambs is next. You know, just, I know. I get it. I get it.
Cool. All right. Maybe we should figure out what we're going to do next then. I don't know. I know we just did a thriller. I was thinking maybe we could go to horror.
That's not a bad idea.
I mean, I saw a remake available on Amazon Prime. The new Child's Play is available on Amazon.
All right. All right. Cool.
All right, let's do a little bit of Child's Play, huh? Little Chucky.
Yeah. I got no problem with that.
All right, so Child's Play it is for the next episode. Excellent. All right, well, I'm Dan Bulick. You can reach out to us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all at Retro vs. Remake. If you're listening to us on iTunes, if you can give us a 5-star review or a great comment, we greatly appreciate that. You can also check us out on Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, definitely leave us a comment below. Let us know what you thought. Really like those comments there. Reggie?
Yeah, and I'm Reggie Parker. You can find me on Twitter and all that at RP Comedy, but definitely focus more on the Retro versus Remake brand. As always, any comments, any reviews, we're taking it all in, building just a better show. And I think we're really starting to hit our stride. I'm enjoying these conversations. All right, well, I'm Dan Bulick. I'm Reggie Parker. This has been another episode of Retro versus Remake. Don't know how that one came out. That was the best one yet.